Welcome, everyone. I just wanted to welcome you all to our webinar today. Connect with the campaign for grade level reading on social media. On YouTube, subscribe to our channel at Grade Level Reading. On LinkedIn, Facebook, and Instagram, follow us at Campaign for GLR. And on X, follow us at Reading by Third. Please use the hashtag Learning Tuesdays and tag us to tweet anything you learn from today's webinar, and we'll be sure to retweet. We encourage you to share your questions, reflections, and observations on social media. Once again, welcome to you all. My name is Sierra Sanchez, and I'll be behind the scenes helping to produce this webinar. I do want to take a moment to acknowledge our enterprise and programmatic funders, as well as our individual donors. Your support not only allows us to hold these vital conversations, but it encourages us to create meaningful opportunities to share insights, foster connections, and build the CGLR community. I also wanted to give special thanks to our Leo sustaining sponsors, who you can see on the screen here, with special thanks for your contributions to allow us to hold these learning and engagement opportunities. Before we jump in, I just wanted to share a few housekeeping details. We would love for you to introduce yourself, so please use the chat box at the bottom of the screen to share your name, city, or state, and your organization. Be sure when responding to select everyone so that we can all see each other's chat messages and can all know who's here. And we encourage you to share your thoughts and ideas throughout the duration of the webinar. All attendees are in listen-only mode, but we encourage your engagement both through that chat box and by posting any questions you might have in the Q&A box. Our panelists will be keeping an eye on the Q&A box and will type out responses to anything there. The webinar is being recorded and live streamed on Facebook. A link to the recording, as well as any slides, bios, resources, and any additional information will be shared in a follow-up email to all who registered. And last thing, we will be posting a brief on-screen poll during Q&A and highly encourage you to respond. This helps us with our commitment to continuous improvement. And last thing before we jump into the fun stuff, I just wanted to call your attention to some of our upcoming webinars that we have through the month of September. Next week on September 16th, we have an exciting doubleheader, starting with a funder-to-funder conversation that will take a look at the way philanthropy can support child advocacy organizations and networks. At 3 p.m. that same day, we'll have a powerful conversation as part of our Technology-Enhanced Teaching and Learning series that will discuss the ways technology can support families with their youngest children. On September 30th, another doubleheader, two different opportunities. At 12:30, we will have another peer exchange learning conversation, a powerful conversation on early relational health, the cornerstone and common thread. And that same day at 3 p.m., as always, we will have another webinar, this time discussing curriculum at crossroads, evidence, hype, and what works. More information and registration links for those upcoming sessions and some in October will be posted in the chat box now, and we hope that you can join us. And joining you now is Mary Kingston Roach with the Campaign for Grade Level Reading. Thank you and enjoy.
Thanks so much, Sierra, and welcome everyone. We're so glad you're attending with us live and so excited for a great conversation today. I already see at least one participant representing one of the organizations who will be on the panel today with DC PAVE. So welcome and welcome everyone. So I just want to give a few brief remarks and then introduce our panelists and moderator. So today we are building off of our first webinar in this series that we held during GLR Week, where we explore the opportunities and implications of more parents curating their children's K-12 education to meet their specific needs and preferences. In this session, we start with a premise that more choice is not helpful if parents are not aware of such choices, and if they don't also have access and agency to pursue them. Our first panel will dive deeper into this premise, exploring why it's important to support parent agency and informed decisions in this increasingly complex educational landscape, and we'll share relevant research, polling data, and strategies. Then our second panel will share how their organizations are equipping parents with the knowledge, skills, and tools to navigate these increased educational options so they can pursue, advocate for, and design the best possible education for their children. We're excited for you to learn from our presenters today about key research, insights, strategies, policies, and practices that you can bring back to your organizations, communities, and families as we collectively explore both the opportunities that a choice-rich environment brings and the supports needed to ensure parents and families can maximize these opportunities on behalf of their children. And with that, it's my honor to introduce today's guests. So first we have Maya Martin Cadogan, who is founder and executive director of Parents Amplifying Voices in Education, or PAVE, located in Washington, D.C. Welcome, Maya. Next, we have Dr. Cristina González, implementation and advocacy manager with Abriendo Puertas, or Opening Doors, a Ph.D. Welcome, Cristina. Next, we have Dr. Michael McShane, who is Director of National Research with EdChoice. Welcome, Michael. Next, we have Keri Rodrigues, President with the National Parents Union. Welcome, Keri. And last but not least, we have Cindi Williams, who is co-founder of Learning Heroes and also CEO of Waypoint Education Partners. Welcome, Cindi. And you can read about each guest on the bio sheet that we'll post in the chat box. So you're welcome to read more about their backgrounds there. And all of these discussions will be moderated by Dr. Bruno Manno, who is Senior Advisor with the Progressive Policy Institute, where he leads the What Works Lab. And he came to PPI from the Walton Family Foundation, where he was Senior Advisor for Education. And prior to that, he was Senior Associate for Education with the Annie E. Casey Foundation. Bruno has also held senior positions with several education nonprofits and policy organizations, serving as U.S. Assistant Secretary of Education for Policy and Planning. He's a contributor writing about education on Forbes.com and the author or co-author of articles and books, including Charter Schools in Action, Charter Schools at the Crossroads, and the Opportunity to Rise. So we're in great hands with Bruno as our moderator today. And with that, Bruno, I'll turn it over to you.
There. Thanks, Mary, for the introduction, the kind introduction. Before we start our conversation with our guests, I'd like to provide a few context-setting comments. First, to repeat some of what you heard, but to make sure that those who came out a little bit late also have this information. Today's the second of a continuing set of conversations that the campaign is hosting about the idea of parent curation in their child's education. Within the broader discussion and debates about school choice, there are key elements that we want to have several conversations about. The first one, which is available as a recording, that kicked off the series, panelists discussed both the opportunities and implications for equity and accountability that this trend in increased parent curation brings. And there was also a concerted conversation specifically about open enrollment as one form of education choice that is really growing in a variety of ways across the country. The next one in this series is in October, and it'll be on the increasing trend of homeschooling and what it means, not just the traditional kind of homeschooling that was young people staying home, but how it's evolved in a variety of ways in support of what it's traditionally done, but also the way it's integrated more fully into other kinds of education settings, whether that be traditional public schools or the charter schools or other kinds of microschooling opportunities that now exist. Second, just a quick reminder that the concept of parent as curators is not really a new idea, though maybe the use of the word curators is. That's a cool word that's been used to describe what parents are doing now. Parents have always, quote, curated their child's education in a variety of informal and formal ways that span the gamut from selecting books that they read to their children. That's a form of curation. That's a form of taking some time to think about what books might be useful to read to my child, to choosing a preschool for their child or a child care setting for their child. So those are all acts of curating. That is to say, thinking about what my child needs and then what is the best way of delivering what I think my child needs. Today, we're seeing how that's getting much more formal, and we are seeing more parents apply curating to the space of mandatory schooling across grades 12, K to 12. And the kinds of choices available to them, whether these are in the public sector or outside of the public sector, are many more than ever before. Magnet schools, charter schools, traditional district schools that are innovation schools, career pathway programs in high school, open enrollment, micro schools that are part of the public system, whether that be in a traditional public school or in a charter school, homeschooling and all the variations that it's taken on. So there are a lot more choices available to young people today that require parents to think about this maybe in a way they haven't before. Finally, there are different ways to perhaps think about the stresses and the strains and the pushes and the pulls that parents feel as they begin to think about these choices. And they struggle with making these choices. So that's by way of setting a context for our conversation today. I'd like to now ask Keri, Mike, and Cindi to join us in our first panel discussion. There we go. We've got all three now. Keri, Mike, and Cindi, you each hold leadership position roles at national organizations that equip parents in different ways with the knowledge and insights that they need to make these choices for their young people, and then to advocate for their children to have the best options possible. Let's start with a general question, and we'll go to Cindi first, and then Mike, and finally Keri. Tell us a little bit, of course, about the organizations that you work for, but why is it important to help parents navigate these options that are open to them? And Keri, can you share a little bit about each of your organizations and help you help parents do that? Cindi, let's start with you, then
Sure.
Mike and Keri.
Be glad to. And I just want to say a huge thank you to the Campaign for Grade Level Reading. Ralph and the whole team have been huge advocates for parents. We keep saying at this moment in time, we're giving parents voice and choice, but not better information. And I see so many Learning Heroes partners on the call today, so it's fun. Some of you are going to see yourself in my slides, but it's just a reminder, even as we look at the NAEP scores today, that in the midst of huge learning loss and declines and gaps in our system, individual parents don't know that their kids aren't okay. And so Learning Heroes was set up 10 years ago to equip parents with information they need and to give them agency, to meet them where they are. We've done behavioral and mindset research now, longitudinal, qualitative, quantitative, you name it, sort of over the last decade. And the holy grail, or the sort of the aha moment for Learning Heroes, which many of you know, is that 9 in 10 parents think their kids are at or above grade level. So those of you who are pushing this boulder uphill and trying to demand change for a better system in your communities and in your states, you know that the demand side of the equation is often missing. That parents think their kids are fine, and that's because 80% or better are getting Bs. And so, helping parents understand that the situation their child is in may not at all be what they think it is. is the work that Learning Heroes does. And then when they find out, we give them tools and information for free. We partner with states and districts and try to translate what the system creates, which is usually indecipherable, into something that they can really turn into action, and have worked with almost everybody on this screen over the course of that work. So just delighted to be here.
Mike, you want to chime in here? And then
Yeah.
we'll go to Keri.
Yeah, fantastic. Yeah, so I'm Mike McShane. I'm Director of National Research at EdChoice, and we're an organization that's been around for more than a quarter century now. That's a mix of an advocacy and research organization that, as it sort of, we do what it says on the tin. We're interested in educational choice and promoting educational choice across the country. Some of the stuff that I'm going to be showing here in a bit is we do an extensive amount of public opinion polling. Every single month, we poll a nationally representative sample of Americans and a nationally representative sample of American parents to understand their thoughts on a host of issues, specifically thinking of things around school choice and curating education, which I will share some of those results with you, but also on a host of other questions. We also poll teachers, we poll teenagers, we do a lot of it. But obviously, and I think really echoing what Cindi had to say, and to answer your question that you posed earlier, is just this incredible need for information. Some of it's at a very basic level, as more and more states create more and more opportunities for families to curate their education within the traditional public schooling system, in the public charter system, in the private sector, and others. At a baseline level, parents need to know that they're eligible for these programs. They need to know whether they can actually participate in them. And then once they find out whether or not they're eligible for these programs, they need to have an opportunity to survey the potential educational options that are out there. Well, now that I can participate in this program, well, what can I choose from? And then there's like the next, it's like an onion we have to keep peeling, right? Can I participate in this program? Okay, now that I can participate in this program, what can I choose from? And then how can I get the information that I need to make the right choice for my child, to know what is on offer, what sort of quality is happening there, and make those sort of subjective judgments about where they want their students to go. So, like I said, I'm going to talk a lot about polling today, but it's all in the service of trying to better educate people about the options that are available to them and understanding their needs and wants.
Yeah, Keri, tell us a little bit about the National Parents Union, which you founded and lead, and then we'll come back to each of the panelists who will walk us through a little bit more detail, either through slides or through a narrative.
So I'm Keri Rodrigues. I'm Matthew, Miles, and David's mom, and proud to be the president of the National Parents Union. We're kind of an affiliation of all kinds of parent advocacy groups, basically not parents who think their kids are fine, but parents who really know their kids aren't fine and feel stuck, feel like they didn't have any options, didn't have any agency, didn't know what to do, but decided to organize and come together to do something about it. And now we are all collectively helping other parents. So we're 1,800 strong, different organizations in all 50 states, Washington, D.C., and Puerto Rico. We represent about 1.8 million families through that network. And we're really interested in the idea of parents as curators and how we make this easier for parents. Because we got to remember that all of this stuff doesn't happen in a vacuum. And, many of us, didn't have choices worth choosing. Frankly, I didn't know anything about choice when I came into this world. I was a mom who was sitting at the end of an IEP table, and somebody kind of tapped me on the shoulder and said, "Hey, well, have you tried to talk to the local charter school?" I didn't even know what a charter school was. But that is how we operate in education. You basically have to stumble into what your options are. They're not presented to you. And a lot of us as parents are deeply frustrated that that's how we have to find out about these things. But again, not all of this is happening in a vacuum. And we've got to find ways to make this easier, because at the same time that we want parents to become curators, not all of us have choices worth choosing. We're also simultaneously the backbone of the American economy. And frankly, in education, we often put so much responsibility on the shoulders of parents. We now have to be the curators and find the options and seek them out, at the same time that we've got to teach our kids to do math, and we've got to read to them 20 hours a day. Oh, by the way, We also have to find a way to find more money for food because SNAP is being cut. Our healthcare is being cut. We're scared about losing jobs. There's a lot going on for parents. So we've got to figure out a better way so that parents can be active curators, but do it in a way so that it's manageable for them as well.
Thanks, Keri. So let's go back to Cindi. And I know you have some slides to put up, so I'm sure the appropriate person will put them up on the screen and then we'll follow through with those slides.
Yes. So I just want to go back and ground us in the demand side of the equation, because our goal is to be able to pass off a parent to Keri because they actually know that their kids are not okay and they want to advocate for something better for their child. And so this is just reminiscent of what I said 2 minutes ago, but this 88% of parents, regardless of race or income or educational level, think their kids are at or above. Like, that above thing is kind of shocking. Grade level in reading and math, and it seems not coincidental that we're here on NAEP Day and we're looking at 12th grade scores. And we're looking at science and we're seeing these just dramatic drops. And yet when you ask a parent if it's their child, it's not. So how do we help parents understand that it's their kid that needs extra help and extra information? Let's just keep going because I'm going to fly through these. So parents are problem solvers. I did a TED Talk on this, which you're welcome to watch, where we took the decades worth of research and tried to condense it in about 15 minutes. But you all know that grades don't equal grade level, that grade inflation is on the rise, and it's really about 80% of parents say their kids are bringing home B's or better. And the reason that matters is because it's about the only thing they see right now. So if we go to that next slide, you'll see that for parents, good grades equal grade level, but for teachers, they don't. So for teachers, that report card grade is number 6. So we just have to try to figure out that actually, when we started this work, report card grades were number 1 for parents and written or verbal feedback from the teacher was number 2. So those 2 numbers have flipped. I think there's been a lot of conversation by many of you about grade inflation that has caused some questions in the minds of parents. But this idea that teachers know that they have information that parents don't. Teachers are data scientists right now. They have so many dashboards and so many diagnostics at their fingertips, but parents get 0 of those. If we're lucky, they might get a statewide assessment. And so there's what parents know and what teachers know is very different. I'm going to keep going here if we can cue. So here's the good news. This is what I wanted to get to. But when a parent finds out that it's their kid that's not on track, their worry battery literally flips. And if parents are good at anything, it's worrying. We just have it in our DNA. I worry constantly about both of my boys. And so this is tiny. You've all got it in your in the webinar chat, so you can take a look at it. But the thing I want you to take away is that once a parent knows it's their kid, math and reading go from the bottom of the list to the top. So it starts beating things like Keri was mentioning, like paying your bills or putting food on the table. When you know your kid is behind in math or English, that becomes one of the number 1 things that keep you up at night, which is a really powerful force. And I think I've got 2 more here really quick. Tarrant County, I saw one of the Parent Shield colleagues on the call here today. I want to do a huge shout out. So at Learning Heroes, we did a Go Beyond Grades campaign. We're up to 11 cities right now. We've talked to many of you, where we just give parents 2 contradictory pieces of information. And that's what it takes to flip a parent. So if a parent thinks their kids are fine and they see 2 pieces of information that are different from what they expect, whether that's an assessment on their statewide assessment, whether it's a map or a dibbles. Of course, you have to have a dog bark or it's not a Zoom, right? So whatever you can give them, if you can give them 2 pieces of information, they say, hey, I'm not sure that thing I thought is actually true. And so with this campaign, we had about 48% of the parents who got engaged in the campaign talk to their teacher. And once they talk to their teacher, you've got them. So we really are on that demand side of how can we get more parents to know that they need to make better and more informed decisions so that they can become a part of curating and become a part of the conversation Mike is having around choice. So that's how the Learning Heroes team plays into this conversation we're having today.
Thanks, Keri. Mike, do you want to follow up here? I think you've also got some slides to run people through, and then we'll go to Keri.
Sure, absolutely. So I'll try and hustle through these because I'll be throwing a lot of kind of numbers out there. But you'll see, and I think this is being provided to everyone. The link at the bottom of this slide shows where you can get all of our information. So, as I mentioned earlier, we partner with the organization Morning Consult. That you may not be familiar with them as a polling firm, but as soon as you see what all of our graphics look like, you'll probably say, "I've seen that on the internet somewhere." They're obviously a big polling firm that happens. And so, yeah, we poll a nationally representative sample of Americans every month, American parents, and all these other groups. So, it's about 2,200 Americans every month, of whom 1,300 are parents. And so I'm just going to, this is from our most recent report that we put out. The link to that is at the bottom. But if you head to that website, you can see all of the reports that we put out. You can also see we publish all of the cross tabs. So most of the stuff that I'm going to give you here is just general averages across the whole country. But we separated out by, I think, 30 or so different demographic subgroups, whether that's race and ethnicity, whether that's income, whether that's politics, whether that's region, whether that's like urban, rural, all of that sort of stuff. So if you have questions related to those, all of that's available on our website. So we can switch to the next slide. So this is, if we're asking these questions around curation, one question is sort of like, how often do people switch school models, or do people switch between different schooling sectors? So we ask this question basically, have you ever switched, if you don't count middle school to high school, or elementary school to middle school or others, how many of you have switched schooling types? And we define schooling types as public schools, public charter schools, private schools, virtual schools, etc. And pretty routinely in our polling, around between 20 and 25% of parents say that at some point in their child's educational journey, they have changed school types. So that's going in and out of private school, going in and out of public school, going in and out of a public charter school. 74% haven't, and some are unsure. But yeah, usually the numbers fluctuate between 20 and 25%. And we can go to the next slide. Like I said, I'll be going quickly through these. If people have questions, I'm happy to go through them. But yes, so this is another big question that we ask, which is just, if given the option, if you could choose between public school, private school, charter school, homeschooling, etc., where would you choose to send your child to school? So the plurality of respondents, not the majority, but the plurality, said they would send their child to your typical public school. About a third of parents tell us that they would like to send their kids to a private school. Usually it's between 7, 8, less than 10%, between 5 and 10% say that they would send their child to a charter school, and a little bit more than 10% usually tell us that they would like to homeschool their child. Now, obviously, these numbers are not don't correlate with where people actually send their children to school. That only about 5% or so of students are homeschooled. I think, was it 1 or 2%, or no, about another 5 or 6% are in charter schools, and another 10-ish% are in private schools, and the rest are in public schools. But that's, at least, this is their sort of expressed preference of where they would like their children to go to school. We can go to the next one. This is a classic polling question, right? Of just sort of satisfaction and dissatisfaction with your child's experiences. And I think this is actually a really interesting slide, particularly the one asking about district schools, or your sort of traditional public schooling parents, because I think, especially in the wake of the pandemic and others, I hear a lot of people telling me what parents think about schools. And as the guy who does the poll of them every month, I'm like, I don't know if that's actually what they think, because if you hear people who say, "Oh my goodness, parents across the country are up in arms. The majority of parents are not happy with their child's school, etc." That's not really the case. If you combine the people who are very satisfied and somewhat satisfied, that's 80% of American parents. About 80% of American parents say that they are satisfied. I'm sure public school parents. About 80% of American public school parents say that they are satisfied with their child's school. And about 20% say that they are dissatisfied with their child's school. But the interesting thing, and I think is relevant to the conversation that we're having today, is that the biggest group amongst those are people who say that they are somewhat satisfied with their child's school, right? So they think it's okay. They think it's fine. They're not very satisfied, but they're at least somewhat satisfied. So I think casting all of those people as saying, "Oh my gosh, they love their child's school, they think it's great," that's not really an accurate portrait of what they're doing. But also saying, "Oh my goodness, they're dissatisfied and heading for the exits," that's not necessarily the case either. Okay, we can go to the next one. So this is a question that we asked of, if we think back to that first slide where we saw people who have changed schools. We then asked them, okay, what was going on in your former school? We were talking, I think Bruno brought up these ideas of kind of push and pull factors. This would be that sort of push factor. What was sort of pushing you out of your old school when you're moving? And it's really depressing, and I hate to say it, but the most consistent finding that we have over and over again is bullying. That bullying is a huge problem that families are dealing with, and it's a huge reason why people choose to change schools. You'd actually see some of these things here: excessive stress and anxiety, difficulty with teachers, academic needs not being met. Academic needs usually shows up about fourth or fifth. A lot of before this is about mental health, it's about bullying and others. And you can actually see, as much as we've actually been hearing often about culture clashes and all of these things happening in schools, you have to go all the way down to the right there of seeing, concerns that things being taught were different than your family's values and beliefs. Turns out, again, that we hear a lot about that, but in the actual data, when we talk to people of like, why are you leaving schools? Why are you going somewhere else? It's that stuff on the left-hand side: bullying, stress, academics, et cetera. Special needs not being met, obviously, is a big part of that too. We can go to the next slide. So again, around this question of like curation, we've been asking parents for a while about their ideal school schedule. Would you like your child to do the traditional 5 days a week in school? Would they like to do the sort of traditional, if you will, homeschooling, which would be 5 days a week at home? Or would you like some sort of hybrid model? I think many of us maybe have like not particularly pleasant flashbacks of like hybrid schooling that took place during the pandemic, but there are in fact hybrid schools that have been operating all across the country, both in the private public charter and traditional public sector. And one of the things that I think is really fascinating, that we started asking this question years ago, and very, very consistently, we've seen around 40 to 45% of parents tell us that they would like some sort of hybrid schedule. The people who want a full-time homeschool, it really stays pretty steadily around that kind of 10% mark, but around 40 to 45% of parents would like some sort of hybrid schedule for their child. And then again, another about 50-ish%, usually around 50, want the traditional 5-day a week schedule. But that's one way, if you think about sort of curating your child's education, one dimension upon which you could do that is the schedule. And we can go to the next slide. And another way of thinking about curating your child's education has to do with tutoring. There's obviously been a lot of conversation about tutoring post pandemic and learning loss and all the issues that people are dealing with. And around 40% of parents tell us that they are either currently having their child be tutored, they are actively looking for a tutor, or they will be looking for a tutor soon. And then obviously the inverse of that, 60%-ish usually tell us that their child is not being tutored and they're not interested in finding one. And then we can go to the last slide. And this is just a question that we've asked. And again, this may surprise people, but we asked this question: okay, for those of you who say you'd like a tutor, or you're tutoring your child, how much would you spend on tutoring? And the average that we get from a nationally representative sample of parents is more than $350 a month that people say that they would be willing to spend on tutoring. And I don't know if that surprises people, if they think that number's higher than they thought it would be or lower than they thought it would be, but that's what they tell us. And I think that's the last of my slides there. So thank you very much.
Keri, your turn. Keri?
So sorry about that.
Okay.
I lost my audio there. My apologies. In terms of what we're seeing around, parent choice, parent curation, it's very interesting. I think some of the reflections that we have around the issue that Mike was mentioning around the issue of bullying, the issue of mental health safety, all of those things. And that is the number one concern that we see coming up time and time again for American families over and over and over again. The fact that they are very concerned as to whether or not their kids are safe. And a lot of people interpret that in terms of gun safety and whatnot, but we're actually talking about physical safety. We're talking about emotional safety. We're talking about all of those things. You know, we have parents that we talk to in places like Chelsea, Massachusetts, where, you know, we had to help a family recently whose child was the victim of a felony assault in a classroom. After, you know, 3 years of trying to mitigate a process of, you know, restorative justice and meetings and all of these different things. And the parents were so frustrated because they felt like their child was unsafe. This is not a unique story that we hear in this one parent issue. That is primarily one of the major concerns that parents have, that their kids are not in an environment that is conducive to their learning, that is going to get them on a path towards that economic mobility that they want, because their kids are not going to stay engaged enough from school. And actually, it's trying to drag them out of bed. And there's this connection. We're also talking all the time about the chronic absenteeism issue and the fact that kids are trying to exercise their own choice it's so difficult for us to actually motivate them to engage in education. So I think a lot of this stuff is all interconnected. I think it's also very important to reflect on what Cindi brought up in her data. And that is the fact that we have had this valuable data from Learning Heroes over the past 10 years, telling us over and over and over again that we have this incredible communications tool in the report card, but it does not tell parents what they need. And over and over and over again in her surveys through Learning Heroes, we have learned that this is the most effective communication tool that we have with parents, yet we continue to misuse it and frankly lie to parents about where kids are. I can tell you from a personal experience, you know, I'm actually married to an English teacher, and we actually saw our 6th grader struggling and not being able to complete a sentence through a book report. This is after having a kid who's on the honor roll, who is getting A's and B's, and all of the meetings that we're having with teachers, we're told over and over again, he's a great kid, he has a strong sense of social justice, all of those things we know about him. But the fact of the matter is, he can't read well, and he's struggling with writing. And all of the data that we were getting from the school was telling us directly that he was fine. Don't worry about, nothing to see here. And it wasn't until we had to invest our resources, and thank goodness we actually have the resources now where we can go to Sylvan Learning Center and get our own assessment, we were able to discover that this kid was 2.5 years behind grade level. And only through that and through private intervention were we able to actually intervene on our own and make sure that we got it done for this kid. But again, we're a 2-parent household. We have income, we have the ability to do that, and not every family is going to be able to do that. So these are the frustrations that we see and hear every single day. These are not just data points. I love the data, but what we also want to bring is also making sure that this is actually real. These aren't just kids that are on a spreadsheet, but these have longer term impacts for our kids, and the stress and strain that it puts on American families is something that we're seeing through the mental health crisis, not only of our kids, but as the Surgeon General said in the previous administration, there's actually a parent mental health crisis going on right now because we are up at night worried about these things and trying to find solutions for our kids.
Thanks. We've got about 5 minutes, so we'll do one round of one question to each of the same question to each of you. And I'll give you an opportunity to talk about a positive response and a negative response. So the question is, in the work that you've been doing, what is one of the more positive things that you've seen happen on this question of parent curation? And then the flip side of that is, if you want to talk about the negative, what is the one big gap that you still think exists and needs some focus of attention here? So same question to the three of you, do the flip, the positive and the negative. Cindi, let's start with you. We'll go to Mike and then Keri, and then we'll move on to the next panel.
Sure. Well, I'll lift up some of the work of PAVE and Parent Shield, not to steal Maya's thunder in a minute here, but where we've been able to go into communities as learning heroes and partner with all the nonprofits and education organizations on the ground that are reaching out to actual parents, like Keri does. We've really been able to see a change in behavior. And so, for example, in Fort Worth, we really did see 96% of parents in Fort Worth thought their kids were reading at grade level, which we actually didn't believe. We actually had to do those numbers again. It was like, this can't actually be true when you look at the real numbers, except that it was. And so when you look at those tutoring numbers that Mike was showing us earlier, 61% of parents thinking their kids don't need tutored, but they can have free tutoring in Texas and Arkansas and a lot of states where the legislature's given them a voucher. So Tarrant County flipped it. They pulled together 80 organizations in Tarrant County to be a part of the Go Beyond Grades campaign, and we flipped that number by 12 points in one spring. And now we're starting to see all kinds of ramifications of that, because when parents know their kids are part of the group that isn't okay, they act so differently. So I want to just like huge shout out to DC has been the same with PAVE. We've seen those numbers drop in every city where they've decided to try to make sure that parents know the truth. We are lying to parents. They actually do think their kids are fine, and they don't have Keri as a parent who can go figure this out all the time with her sophistication. And then the biggest gap, I would say, is the fact that teachers absolutely know the truth. And when you ask them why they're not sharing that information with a parent, they say, the principal doesn't have my back. The parent's going to blame me. I don't have any extra resources to put on top of this particular situation, and nobody taught me how. So of those, the thing that is the easiest is nobody taught me how. And so at Learning Heroes, we're trying to fill that gap with actually teacher training on how, in a culturally sensitive and optimistic way, you can train teachers to share that information with parents so that they can co-create a plan. So we feel like a huge gap in the system is nobody's actually teaching teachers how to have honest conversations with parents.
Thanks, Mike. You're next.
Yes, I was trying to think of pulling from data, but I think going from Keri's recommendation of remembering that all these data points are actually human beings and things. I think if I have one story that has both sides in one story, it will tell both the good and the bad. I write a column for Forbes, and one of my recent columns was about a school in Florida called Star Lab, and it is a micro school, or was hoping to be a micro school. And if you're, someone like me who wants to see school choice, and I started as a teacher in my day, it's sort of like everything that you would want. This person was like a lifetime educator, had taught in the traditional public sector, had been like an administrator in charter schools. It's amazing. She wants to start this school, a small school, in the middle of a housing project in Sarasota, Florida. And in the sort of center, in a very sort of Floridian arrangement of places, there was like an old kind of like almost like clubhouse thing that was there that had been used. Part of the time had been a daycare center, and it was disused at this point. And she wanted to start a little micro school with 20 kids, because all of the kids that were in the housing project were being bused to all of these different areas. She went door to door. She like recruited all of the people. So again, if you talk about the good side of this, like this is exactly what we want to see happening. These families are having a problem solved. Oh my goodness, a school here that's going to be small, where my kids are going to be known and they're going to be safe and the education's going to be great. And she starts to recruit all of these parents. And then it turns out, in the particular location that she was in, if you have more than six, I believe it was six unrelated children in the K through 12 grades, you are subject to this whole set of additional fire codes and building regulations and others. And so even though there had been more very young children in this very building not long before then, she ended up, I think the final task was something like $80,000 to get fire suppression and all of these things that were there. Even though it was a single room with two doors to the outside, they had to put in this big sprinkler system and everything. And so the point that I make there is that as families curate more and as more options pop up, the whole kind of like regulatory framework, the zoning framework, the measurement framework, like all of this stuff has to grow and adapt with that. And if we continue to shove all of these new learning opportunities into the same old models, they're going to be bad fits. They're not going to give us the information that they need. It's going to stifle all of them. So a lot of the work that I think that needs to be done now is actually kind of sort of boring and detailed, but can actually be super consequential for potential folks trying to solve problems for parents.
Keri, same question, go ahead.
I would say, you know, the thing that's really giving me joy about this moment is watching parents take back their power. And an example of that is some of the work that we're doing with our affiliates across New Jersey right now in relaunching our EPIC campaign. And EPIC is Everyday Parents Impacting Change, where we work with affiliates who are on the grassroots level to empower folks who are already organizing in their communities to really take charge of these kinds of issues. And we're doing this in New Jersey around transparency around data, around accuracy and better data for parents so that we're no longer lying on report cards. And I'm going to continue saying that. Like, I know a lot of people like to soften that language, but if you're not giving us what we need to know, you are gatekeeping and you are lying, and we need to call it out. And these parents are also demanding more evidence-based solutions. So we've got to acknowledge the problem, we've got to confront it, and then work together on a solution. I also want to lift up what Cindi was saying that I thought was so important, and that's around bedside manner. Teaching educators bedside manner, because honestly, you know, these poor educators, especially coming out of colleges, pre-services, it's really hard. No one teaches you, and it's a scary thing to have to go out and say to a parent, oh my gosh, your child is struggling right now. But with doctors, we don't do the same thing. If a doctor has to come out and tell you, you've got cancer, you got a tough diagnosis, but here's what we're going to do together to solve this problem, they're taught that. We've got to do the same thing with educators, because lying to us, keeping it from us, you're not doing us a kindness. The one negative and the one red flag that I want to put out there when we talk about curation and parent choice is, again, not all choices are worth choosing, and not all parents have access to good choices. And that's where this is going to get really tricky. Yes, parents want choice. 86% of American families want more public school choice options, but they've got to provide meaningful, measurable results. This is critically important. Just throwing checks out to parents and saying, you know what, I hope you figure it out. We're going to put up these programs and hopefully you'll get into something. That's not enough, because these kids like mine, kids who come from backgrounds like mine, like, we don't have a trust fund to fall back on if this stuff doesn't work out. If you choose an option that doesn't get your child to proficiency, doesn't get your kid prepared for what the next step is after they get that high school diploma, like, there's nothing to fall back on. So we, as the grown-ups, as the adults running the system, as the ones who are supposed to be holding the system accountable, we've got to stay true to that principle of holding the system accountable for the outcomes they provide for kids. So yes, choice, yes, options, but options that have proven results for kids, because our kids are waiting for us and looking for us to make sure that they get what they deserve out of this.
Thanks. As our transition here, Keri, I'm actually going to use what I think is the motto of the National Parents Union. Nothing about us without us.
That is on one of our t-shirts, I'll tell you that.
Right. And I think that's a useful way of transitioning to the next panel. So I'm going to thank Cindi, Keri, and Mike, and now bring on Maya and Cristina. So let's wait till we get them on. There's Maya and there's Cristina. Maya is the founder and executive director of PAVE here in DC, which is Parents Amplifying Voices in Education. And Cristina is the implementation and advocacy manager for Abriendo Puertas, a national organization that has many local chapters across 42 states. So why don't we do a quick opportunity to both Maya and Cristina to tell us a little bit more about themselves and the organizations that they are involved in, and then we'll come back and have a more extensive conversation. So Maya, you want to go first?
Sure. Thanks so much, Bruno. And it is a pleasure to be here with everyone this afternoon, focused on one of the most important people, or I would say the most important person in a child's life, which is their parent or caregiver. So thank you all for highlighting the work that so many parent leaders across our country have done to make sure that we're focused on the right things for kids. It is my pleasure to be here with you today. As Bruno shared, I am the founder and executive director of PAVE, which in the beautiful world of DC acronyms stands for Parents Amplifying Voices in Education. I am a native Washingtonian, a sixth-generation Washingtonian, raising a seventh generation here in the district. It has been my pleasure to found PAVE along with one of the people who was on our call today, one of our parent leaders, Carla Reed-Witt, who I want to shout out, who also helps to co-lead Decoding Dyslexia here in DC. My work has been really centered on making sure that parents have a seat at the table in all of these rooms of power, and that parents are able to shape our education system to be responsive to the policies and the practices that parents think are important as we build an education system that works for every single child. And so thank you all for having me here today.
Thanks. Maya works with a very specific organization here in DC. Cristina works with a national organization that has a lot of affiliate chapters, so I'll let her introduce herself and tell us more about the organization she's affiliated with.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Cristina González. Like it was mentioned before, I am the Implementation and Advocacy Manager at Abriendo Puertas. I work in 2 departments, so I focus on implementation of our curriculum, which is the heart of our organization, which started over 20 years ago. And we do focus on a methodology, which is popular education, to make everything accessible to families and to make sure that they see themselves as experts and as teachers and the most important educators and leaders in their child's life. And in addition to that, I am also a qualitative researcher. I focus on lived experiences as well, and I focus on lifelong learners. I myself consider myself to be a lifelong learner. I come from a history of being a practitioner in the classroom and also with families. Full circle story, I started as a facilitator of the APOD program, and now I'm working at APOD. I was at one of the schools implementing family education and really built a culture around the curriculum to really engage parents and to honor them in their leadership.
Okay, thanks. Let's go to Maya now to talk a little bit more in detail about the kind of work that you do. And just as a quick introduction for people who don't know this, DC is as they would say, a choice-rich environment in a number of different ways, but let's just talk about public education specifically. The charter sector and the traditional school sector are about evenly divided when it comes to the number of young people enrolled in these schools. It's about a 50-50 system. And even within the traditional sector, there are a lot of choices available, and people have options available to them across the border. So this is a very, as they would say, choice-rich environment. And within that context, go ahead, Maya, and give us a better sense of some of the things you're going to talk about.
Yeah, absolutely. So to just echo Bruno's words, in DC, 50% of our students are enrolled in a public charter school, nearly. We're at like 48, 49%, depending on the year. The other 50% that are in DCPS, which is our traditional public school system, as Bruno said, 65% of those students are going to a school that is not their neighborhood school. So many of our students are going to open enrollment schools throughout our district. And PAVE parent leaders have also helped to create some of those schools, including the first specialized high school located east of the Anacostia River called Bard Early College High School, located now in Ward 8, previously in Ward 7, that all our graduates receive an associate's degree when they graduate, which is important for our parent leaders. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about how our parent voice works in that choice-rich ecosystem, how our parents are making sure that those choices are actually strong choices for kids, that those choices are equitably resourced, and that we have the policies, practices, and supports around those choices to make sure that every child is receiving a great education. So just a little bit about PAVE. We really think of this as a three-pronged model in terms of the systems level work that we're doing. We connect people, which is your community engagement work. We inform people, which is your policy work. And we empower people, meaning that people already have power, but we give them the rooms to allow them to manifest that power in terms of their advocacy. And we really believe that every parent should have a voice and a choice in our education system and the vision that we have together as a people in DC for what that looks like. In that vision, we believe that parents have to be both partners and leaders with schools and policymakers to develop that diversity of safe, nurturing, and great schools for every child in every ward and community. In terms of the way that we do that work together, you can move to the next slide. One of the things that is really important for us is that we are centered in 5 core values. So one is that parents have the information that they need. Speaking to what Cindi was talking about, we have worked closely with Learning Heroes to make sure that parents have the data and information so they can make the best decisions for their children. Number 2 is that we have adequate and equitable funding to support all children. That means that it's not different by sector because as we know, parents are agnostic of sector. They are just looking for the best school for their child. And our funding should follow our children and should make sure that every school can give them everything they deserve. The third is that every child has a safe, healthy, and welcoming school environment. So that's everything from school nurses to safe passage to school. The fourth is that every child should have access to OST and out of school time and summer programs that allow them to foster their passions, extend their learning, and make sure that they can figure out the futures that they want for themselves. And the last is that every parents have the resources to support their children, not just at school, but also at home. And so that we're connecting between school and home because the learning happens for kids 24/7, even if they're in the buildings 8 hours a day, that learning is continuous. And so we want to make sure of that. And so we really just believe, as Keri and her team at NPU do, that in the power of parent voice, and that this system is built not just by and with for families, but by and with them. In terms of how, on the next slide, we do that work here at PAVE, our theory of change is really that in order to get to that mission and vision, we have a set of inputs and activities that we do together as an organization to make sure that parents can understand the system, that they are becoming parent leaders together in a formal way, that they're advocating for and on behalf of great schools, and they're building relationships with DC policymakers and other stakeholders. That is everything from one-to-one meetings that we're doing to group work that we do together through our parent leader and education boards. We're meeting with the DC Council, the State Board of Education, the mayor's office, and her team. We're doing learning sessions. We host a literacy night and a math night so that people can learn not just what's happening in our schools around literacy and math, but what are best practices and how can they have those conversations with their child's teacher. We send out regular newsletters and communications, and we even do events where parents are always the lead at those tables. On the next slide, we talk a little bit about what we really want to get to in that work. So our ultimate impact in everything that we're doing is about systems change. We want to see that parents have lasting power in the education system in DC and beyond, and that we really believe that if we're doing this work right, every single systems leader, so that's a policymaker, a school leader, an elected official, an appointed official, we don't have to ask them, but they are actually making sure that parent voice and leadership are in every room where it happens. And that only happens because every year we're winning for kids. And so each year we see policy change that's both when funding wins, we've increased the amount of funding for per pupil student, for every student. We've increased the amount of funding for students who are furthest from opportunity. We've increased money for out of school time programs, for mental health programs, but we also see school wins. I shared with you about BARD, the school in DCPS or traditional system. That is an open enrollment high school that provides an associate degree for graduates. And for the first time, parents are traveling backwards and students are traveling backwards from west of the river to the east of the river to attend a specialized high school. But that's also really important that we have as well the Ward 8 post. So we have our first charter school on Joint Base Anacostia Bowling. That was actually an RFP. It was nearly 80 pages written by parents to select an operator that our authorizer in DC then approved based upon what the parents had selected. Learn has now been open for 4 years. It is educating students in pre-K through 3rd grade, and it is so beautiful to see our DC residents together with military families learning together on Joint Base Anacostia Bowling. We focus on the school report report card to make sure parents have data about how our schools are performing and know not just what are the academic results. We have the highest math and reading progress in the country right now. We have even seen great gains on our local test, DC CAPE, our state test, in addition to on NAEP, but also that we are looking at how we're funding those schools and what we're looking at in terms of chronic absenteeism and all those different components. The inputs on that are really that parents are the main relationship with education decision makers. My goal when I started PAVE was really just to open the doors of the rooms that I already had access to families so that they could be the leaders in all those spaces. So they're driving the policies. They're partnering with those policymakers and school leaders, and they're making sure that they are identifying what it is that they want out of the system to change. And how do we make that happen? What are some of the activities that we do? If you move to the next slide, one of the things that we love is just that they are the center of all of our work at all times. So parents are really they're sharing their experiences, they're sharing what are our successes and challenges, they're making sure that they're identifying the future that they want to see for our kids. And I think that has to be the center of what every great parent organization does, like Keri's. I know that's going to come up in a minute from Cristina, is that parents are the center of everything. If you move to the next slide, some of the ways that we make sure that their voices are really centered is that we invest in those relationships and we build trust. I think that I cannot I cannot stress enough the importance of trust, especially in this time. I think we have been able to do at PAVE is to make sure people know that our parents are in this work together with our policymakers and our school leaders to make our schools better. Sure, we have criticism of the way that the system is working, but we will get our hands dirty to figure out how we fix it, and we will acknowledge the role that all of us have to play in making that happen. We are hyper local. We understand we know DC, and that we do this in a way that honors our legacy and traditions and histories and stories of all of our people. We really think about how are we doing strong, robust, and thoughtful policy analysis and advocacy support. At our job at PAVE, even as staff, is to be a completely objective source of information, and we share with them information that looks good, information that doesn't make us look good as a state. We share with them information from the left and from the right. We share with them information from all different diverse vantage points so that they can make their own decisions. And then we just make sure that parents are in the room where it happens, as they say in Hamilton, so that they are the ones that are influencing the system that is here to serve them and their children. So if we move to the next slide, one of the kind of activities that we do to make that happen is through our PLE boards. We have parents from across the wards in DC. We focus on 6 of the 8 wards where the majority of public school students, both in charters and our traditional school system, are centered, which is wards 1, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. We have parents from 2 and 3. It's just that those have smaller numbers of children and smaller numbers of children enrolled in public schools of either type. And we make sure that parents are making all the decisions. So if you want to decide what the policy issue is going to be at PAVE, it is better to talk to Carla, who's on this call today, than it is to talk to me, because I actually don't get a vote, even though I am now a parent. My role at PAVE as the ED is really to be Vanna Black, I like to say, and to be in the background while they are doing their work to make decisions for the organization in the foreground. On the next slide, we also talk about how those decisions they make on their policy issues. They actually write their own policy statement of beliefs. These are their own policy statements about the issues that they select. And you see this picture on the slide, that is actually parents, and you see them with all those papers. Those are the words they wrote that they are now workshopping and wordsmithing to figure out how do they want to make that even stronger. And they then take those statements of beliefs on the next slide to their elected officials and policymakers to share with them. So if you move to the next slide, that is what we call DC Parent Voice and Choice Week. And you'll see that around the table, it is only parents that are sitting there with their elected officials. This is in the DC Council Chairman's conference room, so Chairman Mendelson. And as you will see, it is parents all around the room. They are the people that are asking the questions. They are people that are pushing the council members. They are the people that are making sure to share their stories. It is really about parents, and they are sharing those statements and then amplifying their voices together in all of those rooms where it happens. And so, the last piece of that is how do we select what those issues are going to be? If you move to the next slide, that is through our annual Parent Policy Summit. So next slide. Sorry, maybe I think deleted one. So that's through our annual Parent Policy Summit where parents actually vote. It's a democratic vote where people pick their issues and then they select those issues and push them forward. So one of the things I really want to highlight is we're so proud right now just to think about how far DC has come in the past couple decades, right? As Bruno talked about, we have this robust system of school choice, but a choice is only as good as the supports, the policies, the funding, and the resources you're putting around every single choice that you're making available to families. It's only as good as the information. We have a common lottery in the district. That was really led by parents in terms of how many choices should we have, how many rounds of applications, how should that system be structured. We had a parent advisory council that helped to delineate and determine that, and it wasn't just about systems leaders. I think what we stress is you can only make a great system if you put parents at the center, and parents want to be engaged. The average number of hours that parents like Carla, who's on the call, are giving every year is 75 hours of work, and we have over 100 of those parents who are giving that much time. That is not something they get paid for. That is not something that they are doing in their professional lives. This is what they are doing because they care not just about their baby, but all of the babies that are a part of the District of Columbia. And so I think it's so important to think about how are we really putting parents at the center? How are we, when we say parent power, how are we actually giving the power that all of us as folks who went to schools like I did, like the Harvard Kennedy School, how are we giving our power to share it? Because it is not a zero-sum game. And the more people that we bring into this process together, the better and stronger our schools can be. And we can prove it in DC. As I said, we have the highest math and reading progress. We have the highest universal pre-K program in the country in terms of access to pre-K 3 and pre-K 4 in our schools. Almost 95% of our 4-year-olds are enrolled, and almost 90%, I think 88% right now, of our 3-year-olds. I just think that when you think about what we have been able to do as an urban district to move education forward, while we still have so far to go, it could not have been done without putting parents at the center of that system's change. And so I want to give kudos to all of the families over decades who have made that possible, including all of our parent leaders in the past 10 years at PAVE. Thank you all so much for having us here today.
A quick question, Maya, just so people have some context
Yep.
here. How old is PAVE? How long have you been working? And
we started in 2016, so we are almost exactly 10 years old. Yeah, we've been going for just about a decade.
The point is, none of this happens overnight. It's a long.
Right. I think that's one of the important things about systems change. I liken it many times to the tanker in the Suez Canal. You cannot turn it fast, right? You have to turn it together. You have to turn it with a lot of different tools in your belt, and you have to turn it over time. But if you invest in it correctly, you can open up so much good work for kids.
Okay, Cristina. Hi. So go ahead with your slides. And by the way, for those of you who don't know this, the slides will be available to everyone. And I think that at some point, the link to the slides was put in the space to the right there with a link to all of them. But go ahead, Cristina.
Thank you, Bruno. So with Abriendo Puertas, what we focus on is centering parenting, and we believe that parenting is the toughest job in the world and the most important one. And we focus on moving people, resources, and systems to honor and support parents as leaders. Part of it is the skill building and also honoring them as experts in that experience and that journey. Next slide, please. At the heart of the work that we do, we have our curriculum. Our curriculum focuses on developing that leadership. It's also co-created with parents for parents, and it is grounded in research. Our target audience is parents with children 0 to 5, but we have implementing partners in 42 different states, in schools and churches, community-based organizations, home-based centers, family centers, and center-based childcare. Our methodology is popular education. So we have a facilitation, shared experience rather than an expert at the front of the room, because every person going through this journey is an expert in their lived experience. Our curriculum includes 10 sessions. And if you can go to the next slide, please. And these 10 sessions take parents through a journey. Each session is 2 hours long. The first session focuses on I am my child's first teacher, or home, my child's first school. And each one has a dicho, a quote or a phrase, in order to start dialogue, in order to build trust, and in order to speak about experiences. In addition to that, we focus on physical and emotional health. Next slide, please. We focus on building more awareness about media and technology and the responsibility that we have, whether it's at school or at home, to make sure that students are using technology responsibly. We also want to have a shift in the way that people perceive math. So we have a session that focuses on math, which is Count With Me, and it's making math fun and bringing math into the home where there's no fear. Sometimes parents are scared of math, children are scared of math. So it's also about shifting the culture that we have around learning. And we also build excitement about getting ready for school and championing children's futures and celebrating parents too who go through this journey. Next slide, please. Our impact, we work with over 500 local organizations across 42 states. And as of now, we have over 4,000 facilitators. Next slide. And we also work on our national survey, which focuses on we focus on developing our National Latino Family Report. For our family report in 2025, we have families who identified 6 top issues that they don't want the current administration to address: improving wages and income, addressing the rising cost of living, creating affordable and attainable housing, protecting immigrant rights, and providing a path to citizenship for immigrants, and reducing gun violence and mass shootings. In addition to that, we also focus on creating spotlights for specific states, such as Arizona, where 96% of the participants rated lowering health rate costs as an important issue. In California, 98% of California residents, families, said making housing more affordable is important. In Florida, 83% of Latino families say it is very important that their child care provider offers fair salaries and good working conditions for caregivers and educators. And in New Mexico, 94% of respondents support the creation of paid family and medical leave programs throughout the state. 99% of surveyed families in Texas said creating jobs with living wages and benefits is an important issue that Congress and the president must address. And you might be wondering, why is this important when we're talking about education and learning? Children need to be well fed when they come to the classroom to learn. So all the issues that families are identifying right now are interconnected, and crucial that we address them when we want children to come to learn in the classroom or at home. We've, I believe Keri spoke about SNAP earlier. We also have Mike touched on private schools and traditional schools and rural schools. And we also need to create differentiated systems and understand these systems. And that's what Abriendo Puertas does through the curriculum. It's flexible enough for each organization that is implementing to add their data sets to some of the activities that we have, where they can unpack that with families to understand their current context and how their space, their time, their needs, the context impacts their overall experience in their community. But they're also better able to choose a school. You know, like I don't think that private school would necessarily be a choice or accessible for a lot of the families that we might be working with, because they might come from low-income backgrounds, but there is a choice in the vision of the school. If it's community school, if it's a community hub, in the way that they address some of the challenges that families are encountering, and just a level of awareness that the school has about the lived experience of the families that they work with. Next slide, please. Some of the accomplishments from our 2024 is that we led national institutes. And we also have a train the trainer model, and this is really important. We train facilitators to implement in their neighborhood. We don't implement the curriculum for them because we do not live in those communities. We do not understand the communities the way our implementing partners do, because they work there and they live there, so they're better able to amplify the impact that the curriculum would have. We've served over 80,000 families across the 42 states, and we also added 317 new facilitators. Next slide, please. Part of our advocacy also includes working in the Latino Infant Initiative, and our Latino Infant Initiative is informed by the surveys, but by our families, by the lived experience that they have. We have continued to partner with Unidos US to improve the quality of life for Latino infants, and we do believe it's important to start from maternal health. Sometimes when we get to 4th grade, where we're seeing some of the test scores, that's just a touch point. But a lot of the early learning sometimes gets forgotten, and we need to create a straight pipeline where we are acknowledging the early years so that we have less interventions or strategic interventions in the long run in K-12. Sometimes we only begin in K-12 when the early years are the formative years and like the brain development is actually happening. We're headquartered in Los Angeles, and we also have headquarters in New Mexico. And our New Mexico team has partnered with Partnership for Community Action, where they also are piloting a baby bond program. And we have awarded 15 low-income children with a $6,000 interest-bearing trust. So we will see the impact in the long run. And what might work, some of the policy initiatives that might work for New Mexico might not work for California, because we have rural and urban areas too. So we do understand that there are differentiated approaches, which is why it's important for us to center the experiences of the families and to also have context in mind. In California, we participate in the Dual Language Learner Master Plan Advocates collaboration group to offer recommendations for the state. And this is also because out of our surveys, we have learned that families do want their children to receive a bilingual education. So we want to make sure that we bring that to the forefront. We participate in the Whole Child Community Equity Group. And we do focus on a whole child approach, a family-centered approach. In Texas, we have collaboration with Avance and Unidos US. And something that's really important about the work that we do is the collaboration with families, the collaboration with organizations, and just making sure that we understand the strengths of our communities, and so that we can further develop those skills, right? We don't come as experts, and that's a way that we build trust, right? Like we honor what they already know, we honor who they are, and we honor what they want to do for their children, and have them also find that alignment with their schools, with our implementing partners. One of the things that was mentioned previously too is like, that we must do it in a manageable way. I believe Keri mentioned that, and that's something that we offer through our programming and the support that we offer for our implementing partners. And one of the things that I know that bullying was mentioned earlier, that's a conversation that we focus on too. When we look at how do we define bullying, how do we understand this? So we want to make sure that they have the information to ask questions, to bring them to the schools, to bring them to their communities, and then make informed decisions with that information. Thank you.
Just one quick question, the same one I asked Maya, so people have a sense of perspective here. How long has this work been going on with your organization? When were they founded?
So Abriendo Puertas has been around like 25 years, but we've expanded on so we worked on the curriculum, and we've expanded our advocacy in the last 3 to 5 years, where we're actually expanding the work into policy and advocacy.
Okay, I have one quick question to both of you, like I did with the other group, and you can do both positive and negative, and then we'll bring everyone back together for some general questions. But you've done a lot of work with districts or within districts. What is, on the positive side, how have districts most helped you advance your work? And then on the barrier side, what has been the biggest barrier to the work that you've done from the perspective of working in a district environment? Why don't, Cristina, you do first, and then Maya.
I would say on the positive side, there is a willingness to partner with us. I think on what I would identify as a gap is that our education workforce is overworked and underpaid. So we need to get priorities right. And then that's an area where we can advocate more so that they can actually provide the type of education that parents are advocating for. Otherwise, we're creating like two different groups that are fighting each other, but neither has the resources, right, to change that system. And these policies need to be changed from the top, but there needs to be a push from the bottom too. So there needs to be a grassroots and top to bottom effort as well.
Maya?
Yeah, so in DC, we have 65 districts total between our 64 charter school networks and then DCPS, our traditional school district. And so one of the things I think that is really great is that we have, as Cristina talked about, we have a really strong relationship with all of the charters and DCPS. I was actually talking to someone who was in DCPS's central office about how PAVE used to run their professional development for their family and community engagement team. And I thought that was really helpful to be able to share with them how do we do our work in our model, and have them really think critically about how they're engaging with parents. I saw there was a question I want to get to make sure to answer how they're building trust with families. And so I think it's been great to be able to do that work directly with districts. We've also done that with many of our charter school networks. And so I think the ability to be able to learn together has been a really positive outcropping of this work, similar to what Cristina said. I think on the challenging side, I think as Cristina kind of mentioned it, there's a lot of politics at play, right? So sometimes there's even something that the district is in favor of, but then we've also got to get the council and the mayor's office all aligned with what schools want. And those are different needs and concerns. A great example of that I could give is on safe passage to school, which is an issue our parent leaders have been working on since the pandemic, which it became a real issue because to get kids back in school, you had to do safe passage. You had to think about how kids were getting to and from school safely. And so we started working on that, and we had one new resource that our deputy mayor for education's office had created called DC School Connect. They were small micro transit routes to get kids to and from school in certain communities that had the highest rates of both chronic absenteeism and safety issues, right? And parents love them. We heard really great things from parents, and I don't know who else works in the system, but rarely do you have a government-created transportation system that the parents are like, we love it. We would like to see it continue. School buses are usually not very well loved as much as they are needed, right? They don't feel like they run on time and they have issues with pickup, but this was not the case with DC School Connect. And the mayor put the money back in the budget for the program, but a council member wanted to take it away. And the schools liked it, right? So we had to figure out how to triangulate all three of those groups of people to make sure it remained in the budget because the council member was going to cut it to put it towards something else. And that took real work of parents and schools together. So we actually had schools testifying at the same time we had parents testifying before the council, and then really triangulating all that. It shouldn't be that hard, right? When you have something that works and that's seeing real impact on the outcomes for kids, but it just is. Because that's the way politics just kind of happens. And it doesn't matter party, it just matters people in terms of people and how they operate. So I wish we had to do less of that. We were really glad about the win, but I felt like it shouldn't be something that we even need to talk about. Like it should be something that's just an easy yes. And it just isn't all the time. And that, means that like our team we actually only have 4 full-time people at PAVE are working, as Cristina said, overtime to make that happen. So
Okay.
that's what I would highlight.
Yeah, let's bring the other 3 panelists back on. And if you see me reading here, I'm not ignoring everyone. I'm just, folks are summarizing questions and feeding them to me. So I'm going to be looking here. The first one is on this question of trust. I mean, the work that you do is impossible without establishing trust between yourself, the organization you represent, and the people you're working with. So what is most fundamental to establishing the kind of trust that's needed to build the relationships that lead to the kind of work that you do? We don't want to spend all our time just on this one question. So, be as succinct as you can be. But it seems to me that this is sort of a fundamental threshold issue, and it would be useful to have each of you speak to this a little bit. I'm just going to, let's go back to the first group and work our way through that. Cindi, why don't you start? We'll go to Keri, Mike, then Cristina, and lastly, Maya.
Yeah, so I'd say we're not as retail as the rest of this group in the sense that we work with states and districts and organizations to create information that then is effective to the parents. So for us, it's our evidence base. It's having randomized control trials on our products to do the consumer testing, and it's the way in which we conduct the research. And so when we're trying to work with Virginia or Texas or Arkansas or Tennessee or any of the places that we are right now, they have to believe that what we're telling them is not what we think, but what we know.
So, I mean, it sounds almost elementary, but accurate information, good information. And your reputation is based on that, people knowing that. But go ahead, Keri.
I feel like these are human being lessons. You know, I've been a community organizer for 30 years, since I was about 16 years old. I used to, I sometimes joke, I used to organize girls to go fight when I was young, and now I organize girls to go fight just with different access to opportunity, right? But I've been working in these spaces, organizing, you know, literally my whole life. And there's no beating around that. Like, you've got to show up in community, you've got to be in community. And frankly, our organization, we're not removed from, you know, our members and our affiliates. We are them. I started a local organization because I was a mama who was fed up with not having a voice, and I grew it here in Massachusetts. And then I found other kindred spirits and other mamas who were organizing the same way, and like, game recognizes game. And that's how we built out this network. So I think there's no kind of beating that, and it's, you got to, you know, put in the work. And again, as these ladies were just saying, they've been at this for 10 years, for 25 years. You got to, that's the work you got to do. It's tough, it's slow, it's unsexy, but that's how it gets done.
Mike, any insight here from the perspective of whether you want to consider the policy context here or the polling stuff?
Yeah, I think for me, my answer is building trust through transparency. So like we're part of an organization called the APOR, American Association of Public Opinion Research, where we have to hit pretty high thresholds of disclosure of how we conduct our surveys and what our stuff. And so if people go to the link in the slides that were shared, you can look around and see that we publish the exact questionnaire that we ask and the order in which all the questions, we have all of the crosstabs broken down, all of that sort of stuff, to try and be as transparent as possible with folks where they may like the way we ask the question or they may like the result or not, but they know exactly what we did and how they did it, and they can make a fair judgment for themselves.
Cristina?
For us, it's our methodology for popular education. It is evidence-based, but it's also, it's not just what we do, why we do it, but also how we do it, because behavior is language. So it's our consistency, the respect that we have for families, the truthfulness that we share with them, and the integrity of the work.
Maya, go ahead.
Yeah, I will double tap on everything everyone else said. And the last thing I'll just say, trust is built by loving on people and knowing who they are. At PAVE, we always have ginger ale available because it is a solve for all things with our mamas. We have church fans because most of our moms are above 35 and we get hot in rooms. And so we need a church fan to stay cool. We have really good drinks at all of our parties. And so when our elected officials show up and they want an old fashioned made the way that they want it, they can get it. And we have a good DJ everywhere that we go. I think sometimes people forget that at the end of the day, whether or not you're a systems leader or a parent or a district leader or a school leader, you're just a person. And you are still a parent and you still love people and you're in community, and you have to show up like that all the time so that people see your full scale of humanity, no matter what role you have. And that is one of the things we really believe in. And so I would just make sure people know trust is built because you just are showing up as people and you're loving on people as people.
Okay, Mary, are you ready to come back on? There you are. Okay, you're going to close us out.
Yes, definitely. And thank you all so much. I just, on behalf of all of us, just want to thank all of our panelists and Bruno as our moderator. And if you enjoyed this conversation, please register for our next sessions on this topic. The next one will be October 21st. So we'll show that slide of upcoming sessions in a second, but just want to thank each of our panelists so much. And there's definitely a lot of good quotables here that we'll try to capture in our summary that we'll send you all. along with the slide deck and all the other information. So please join us for these upcoming webinars. I'll just flag the one on the bottom, which is the next session in this series, where we'll look at the evolution of homeschooling. That's going to be on October 21st. And you'll get the recording to the session today, along with the full slide deck and a summary with some of these quotes, these great quotes. And Cristina, Mike, Cindi, Keri, Maya, thank you all so much. And Bruno, for your passion, your advocacy, and everything you're doing every day in communities across the country to make sure that parents and families have the access, opportunities, agency to give their kids the best education possible, whatever that looks like. So thank you all so much, and thank you all for joining us, and have a great afternoon.
Thanks.
Thank you.